Good morning. My name is Jordan Lyons, and today I will be teaching you how to properly sand and prep wood for stain or to paint. So, first, how many of you have ever done a Pinterest project, DIY, or anything like that? Right? Wow, actually a lot more than I expected. So, sanding is very important for the overall quality of your projects. So if you don't sand, like for example today I have a piece of maple here, it's kind of rough on certain edges. So I could make whatever I'm making, so like a table or something, that would be great. All your cuts are correct, all your joints are perfect, put everything together. But do you want to feel like shark skin, rough, get splinters on your overall project? You don't. You want that nice, smooth, shiny finish. That's what we kind of expect when we think of fine grade furniture. So, today I'm going to be talking about the differences of your wood as well as sandpaper. So there's many different types of sandpaper, and there's misconceptions about sandpaper too. A lot of people see just random numbers on sandpaper and they don't really know what it means. So today I'm going to explain to you what the difference is. So normally I like to start with 60 grit sandpaper. It is very coarse. So this is for rapid removal of material. So if you have like a lot of scratches or divots in the wood, you're going to use this, and that's what's going to remove all those imperfections of the wood. The higher the number gets, the smoother it becomes. So I'm going to write down the increments of sandpaper that you should worry about, and I'm going to tell you if it's going to be about, depending on what you're doing. So staining versus paint, and so on and so forth. So normally it starts at 60, 80, 120, 180, 220, 320, 400, and 500. Once you get to this is literally finish. This is going to be very smooth. You can also it goes up to thousands. Also, you can use a piece of notebook paper as well, and that would actually smooth it out even more. But so sanding is very important. It is probably the most important part, in my opinion, in any type of project that you do. So 60, this is what's going to get all the splinters and stuff off the wood. Once you're done with 60, you have to move up. People just think they do 60, they get all of it off, and then they go to 220, and then they're done. That's not the case. You have to progress upwards for a better quality product. So, without further ado, I'm also going to tell you about the grain. So you need to sand with the grain of the wood. So this is also why I asked for the marker, because I don't think all of you can see the grain from here. So I am not an art student by no means. So if you see lines in wood like this is the grain of the wood. You want to sand in a direction from one end all the way to the other end with that. Reason being, if you were to sand from, say, north to south, it will actually, these grains are harder than the non-grain wood. So when you go this way, it'll leave divots in your wood. So if you take your fingers like this, imagine that your fingers are the grain of the wood. If you go with it, see how it's nice and smooth and you can flow, versus if you go across, how you feel the divots, that's the same principle. So you're going to do this, 60 grit, you're going to knock off all the little splinters and the edges. And then you go to 80 grit, and that's going to further remove it off. So in between the wood, you'll see like little divots of this. Now, when you're transitioning from 60 to 80, I always recommend it can feel smooth. Once you go 60, it does feel somewhat smooth until you get a cloth and you damp this with water. Then you're going to wipe it off. This gets all of the dust out of the pores of the wood. And what you think is actually smooth is really not, because you can feel that the fibers will raise. And then now when you sand to 80, it removes those fibers. Rinse and repeat, keep doing it. Now, if you are to paint something, even if you have an old door, like for example, I have an old front door, it probably has lead-based paint because I just bought a house from the 60s. It's cracking and stuff like that. If you weren't to paint, or if you weren't to sand that off, is not going to look that great. You're still going to see all the cracks and everything else on it. So what I always do is I do 60-80 to get most of it off, and then I end at 120 for paint, because that's pretty much all you got to do. 220 is the rule of thumb for anything that you're going to stain, because it's a lot smoother. You want it to be finer than painting, because paint's going to fill all those pores anyways, versus stain's not really going to. Once you get to 220, that's when you can polyurethane, or like the shiny part that you see on like a, if you've ever been to a bar or a table like that and it's got really clear shiny stuff, that's polyurethane. You do this for the stain, then you put your first coat of poly on, and then you do 320, and it depends on 320, another coat. You're going to be sanding for forever if you ever get into woodworking. It's also great if you have spousal issues. And you need some space, you're like, I really got to go out in the shop and sand on this. So again, with the direction of the sanding, you're going to do this. So I have today, to save you some time because, again, it takes forever, I have 60 grit sandpaper. This goes onto an actual machine. Today I'm just going to show you how to do it by hand. This is like entry level. Then you can also do a sanding block where you can attach this to like a block of wood and staple it and it'll hold it for you. You don't really have to do all that, but some people prefer it. So I'm actually going to ask for a volunteer. Oh yeah, she's on it. She's like, we're doing it. All right. So this is actually a piece that I'm working on now at home. I'm making a coffee table. So you're gonna help me with my coffee table here. So if you mess up, I'm gonna tell my fiance it was your fault. So here's the 60 grit. So what you're gonna do is I always put one hand here. You're going to keep this flat. You don't want to go to the edges because it's going to round the edges because you want this to be a straight edge and you're just going to go like this. Okay, and then go fast.
It's like HGTV came to class. I love it.
So like I said, sanding is probably the most important part of this process and stuff like this, and you will be sanding for what feels like forever. So unless you're doing that, if you're only doing this for one project, if you're on Pinterest and you just have to have it or anything else like that, you can do this method. But if this is something you're going to do all the time, I highly suggest getting an orbital sander. An orbital sander will vibrate in all different types of directions, which you don't have to worry about going really with the grain at that point because the rotations per minute is way more than what we can generate with our own hands. All right, let's see how you did. So pretty good. You see how there's dust when you do that, how there's dust now on my fingers? That's when you would want to get a rag with water, and then you'll wipe away. And see how it's, do you feel like it's still smooth? Mm-hmm. Versus, say, this side?
Yeah.
Is it a lot better?
Mm-hmm.
Can I get another volunteer? So now, we are going to go to 220. Again, that is the grit of the sandpaper. I always tear it, and it comes in everything. So like this sandpaper is different than obviously this one. This one has like a Velcro backing that will go onto the orbital sander versus this one. You can get like a cheaper kind of sander, and that one you would have to go with the grain because it doesn't vibrate per se, and it just locks into it. Or these are perfect too for making like that sanding block. So there you are. And the sand spot, so focus right here, going in with the direction. Very therapeutic. Like if you're the type of person. And that also makes you really enjoy your projects because you're way more in tune with everything that's going to happen. Keep going. Now, obviously you want to sand a lot more than this. This is literally just for this experience here. So obviously I don't have any water with me, and I want to keep this wood as dry as possible because I'm trying to finish this today. So feel that? So that's a lot smoother than that. So that's where we started at. So I'm going to go around the class. I'm going to show you right quick. So this is before. I want to touch that? After. So before. And then after. Big difference. So before, after. You did it. Before and after. All right, I'm not going to hit everybody, but so that's essentially what you're looking for when you go to do all this. Now, why should you sand? So sanding for the stain, obviously, if you go to 500 and then you decide to stain, your stain's not going to hold as well as if you started it from an earlier process and so on and so forth. Paint, like I said, you don't have to worry about that because it's more likely to fill into the pores of the wood. And determining how much sanding is needed. So that is also, you gotta physically look at your wood here. Any type of imperfections that you see that's not smooth, you can see little divots and stuff like that, obviously keep going until you don't see any of it. Once you think that you're good, then you go up to the next, and so on and so forth. And eventually, you keep sanding, it's gonna, like an onion, it's gonna show you more and more problems. It's gonna be frustrating, I promise you, but you'll get it done. So, that concludes my presentation today. I hope that you have learned something from this, and hopefully you wanna try to do some woodworking projects. So I went over different types of sandpaper that we use, different grits, sand grits, directions of the grain, how to identify the grain, and that is it.